A Search for God expanded. Lesson 4. Faith. A Search for God. Lesson 4. Faith. What is faith? Need of faith. How faith is developed. Where faith abounds. Self-analysis necessary. Evidences of faith. Reward of faith. What is faith? Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. Affirmation. Create in me a pure heart, O God. Open thou my heart to the faith thou hast implanted in all that seek thy face. Help thou mine unbelief in my God, in my neighbor, in myself. What is faith? Faith is an attribute of the soul. It is the inner spiritual knowledge of the creative forces of the universe. As we become cognizant of the physical body through the senses, so we may become aware of the soul through the activity of its attributes. Faith may be denied or renounced until it ceases to exist within the consciousness of the physical mind. It can be acknowledged and exercised until it will remove mountains. That which is brought into consciousness through the activity of spiritual forces, manifesting in and through the spiritual force of the individual, becomes the essence of faith itself. Hence, it has been termed by many that faith, pure faith, accepts or rejects without basis of reason, beyond the ken and scope of that which is perceived through that which we bring to our activity through the five senses. Faith, as defined by Barnabas, is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith knows that it has already received and acts accordingly, doubting nothing. It is the builder of the seemingly impossible. It is that which has brought into manifestation all that has ever existed. God is, faith is. It is the evidence of God's promise fulfilled. Man's divine privilege is to accept, use, develop, and enjoy the fruits of faith. Let us examine ourselves and see whether we are holding to faith or confidence. We must view spiritual things from spiritual standpoints and accept them in a spiritual way. Many say, we have faith, but they begin to explain that it applies to mental and to material things. We say, we believe, but. Which means there is doubt, the very opposite of faith. Remember, when we entered this material plane, we became subject to material laws. It is the failure of our senses to perceive and fully to understand these laws that brings many of us to the point where we have little real faith. There is a world before us to be understood, the mysteries of the universe, the law of love, the power of thought, and the matchless gift of faith. We stumble, we falter, even when we have the divine promise, if ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place. And it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. With such a promise, should we not cry out, Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. The Edgar Cayce readings. 1. What is faith? There are in the experience of each entity, and in this entity especially, those mental and spiritual activities that are often taken for granted, without considering the source, or without being justified by an individual experience as to the truth, or having self-conviction within as respecting same. This is what is so oft termed blind faith. But the individual experience concerning the source, the reason for the conviction, has been and is the promise, in the purpose of the Christ's entering into the earth, and the promises that are individual, made through and during his material ministry. Then such an experience, or a fulfilling of the promise may be a part of this entity in the present, if there is the consideration given such, and the drawing upon same. For as he has promised, if ye love me ye will keep my commandments, and I and the Father will come and abide with thee. And what ye ask in my name, believing, shall be done in the body. Then, what are the principles, the symbols, the rules, the regulations by which an entity, as this, is to choose, to guide self in its choices? How is the entity to know the manner in which the choice is to be made correctly? Much must be left in faith. What is faith, then? In whom, in what, have ye believed? And who is the author of that ye have believed, and do make manifest in the earth? Then, there must be that coordination, that answering of those first premises which have been indicated, because, as is the mind of the entity, things that equal to the same thing are equal to one another. What, then, is this faith that is indicated? This one knows, when one becomes aware of same. Yet may never put it into words nor tell another by words, or acts even, as to what that consciousness of faith is. Yet we may see the shadow of same in what faith has prompted in the experiences of others, as it is so well expressed in the 11th of Hebrews. Or as given in that God so had faith in man as to give his Son, himself, to die in the flesh, knowing that man must come to the realization, and would, that he, too, must often crucify that of material desire within himself, if he would glorify his better self, or if he would prefer his brother above himself. Or, even as a man, Abraham, the son of faith, the author of faith, offered, or was willing to offer, his only son, his physical heir, knowing that there must be a purpose from that inner voice as to that command. As to that in the financial here we have presented that as has been given. There are those that guide, direct in the quieter moments when the self, the ego seeks and listens, and well that the faith be kept. Faith, meaning that evidence of things hoped for, and experienced by him, who trusts in the action of activity in self, towards that given from the universe, or the energies of the cosmic forces. Any other advice that would be helpful at this time? Keep to those purposes, those attitudes of helpful hopefulness, that the opportunities accorded may be used in service to others. Such an attitude kept in the mental forces will bring the renewing of the faith in the divine, which is the heritage of every soul. Thus the injunction to the entity, do inscribe and know thy ideal, the source of thy hope, the source of thy fears, the source of thy love, the source of that which brings and creates faith in the experience of the entity. What is faith? Evidence. What is evidence? Assurance. One that should not place too much confidence in others. While this is not of a fault, yet the nature of this entity finding there was fault loses faith in self. Hence the greater forces should be exercised in placing that faith, that confidence, that purpose in him, the giver of all good and perfect gifts. Just what method should I use in healing? As has been given, and as has been the experience of self, in raising the consciousness, in the silence, of those that the body or self would aid, even as it is done in self. As the experiences have been, so does the confidence grow in self in that direction. Confidence, then, is of the material or of the physical sense, while faith is an attribute of the soul and spiritual body. Any further advice regarding a change of name? There has been given the way, the manner. When this is conformed to, it must be in self a proof of the activity, or an arousing of that interest, purpose, aim, desire. To be sure, if such is gone at a willy-nilly or half-hearted way or manner, doubting, then the same will be the result. Know in self the amount of effort, the amount of faith, activity, that is to be builded, that is possible to be builded through that given thee. While there should be a reason for the faith that rises in the mental, or the spiritual aspects of any soul's experience, to doubt at all times makes for rather confusing influences in the entity's experience with others. As we find, much might be given as to the characteristics of its abilities in this experience. Yet, add little to these if ye would keep in the way that is pleasing to thy Maker. For the entity is one who had used its abilities, and its opportunities to offer, to induce, to direct its fellow man in the way that leadeth to a more perfect understanding of the purpose of the experiences of an entity in the material world. That there have been many problems and many questionings is true, yet when the entity has allowed or does allow itself to meditate upon the principles of the prompting which come from its study, its application of the law of the Lord which is manifested in the precepts, the commandments, the Psalms and the promises of Jesus, little has been the fear of what the man-force has to offer as to disturbing factors in the earth. Then, as would be given, keep that faith. Keep the precepts which are the promptings. For these are in keeping with not only the tenets of the entity, but of the tenets of the book itself. For the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul, and the greater the stress, the greater the impress of the purposes upon the life of the Master, greater may be the joys which are found. Do not let those things which may not in the present be understood weary thy soul, but know that sometime, somewhere, ye, too, will understand. Keep the faith. Need of faith. Need of faith. Faith is victory. For where there is faith rightly placed, there is no failure, but true success. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life, that is, be full of faith, and have as a reward life's crowning glories. We know that all our development, physical, mental, and spiritual, depends upon our faith in God, in our fellow human beings, and in ourselves. Just in proportion to the amount of faith we place in God and in ourselves, just so great is our development. Why not take God at His word, letting our faith become a living faith by acting in the manner that shows to the world that we know ourselves to be children of God? There is no other way to real victory. Let us have more faith in our fellow human beings. We may not agree with them, but who knows whether they are not more in line with the divine plan than if they were following our lead. It is well to remember that our ideal is manifested through our fellow humans as well as through ourselves, and it is, therefore, more necessary for us to trust them, even though appearances may be against it. It is not only our privilege, but our duty to have faith in ourselves. We are workers together with God, and when we doubt ourselves, we doubt the God within us. He has promised, I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee. Call to mind the words, I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. In His name we are more than conquerors. It is only by having the faith of a little child in the abiding presence of the Christ that we can hope to inherit the kingdom. Faith is a bridge that spans the gulf from the seen to the unseen. It is often all we have left when everything seems against us. With this in mind, how diligently should we cultivate and seek to increase our faith, when all is going well with us, in order that it may be a strong fortress when the storms of life begin to beat upon us. Lord, increase our faith. The Edgar Cayce readings. 2. Need of faith. Are the nerves of motivation dead? If they are, may they not be renewed? Isn't the body renewed at least once every 7 years? Who is to renew it? Who is the giver of life? By pure coordination, pure faith, pure desire to be what God would have thee be. Ye have much work to do in this material plane. Don't become impatient with self, with others. Know ye are indeed the Lord's only as ye fulfill His commandments. Read Psalms 119 under the section Tau. Also St. John 14, especially 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th verses and then those latter portions of the 15th chapter. Apply them to self. How can I bring the work of Edgar Cayce in harmony with my belief? It isn't anyone's business to harmonize beliefs. Rather know what is believed. And if the results of any activity are such that there is credence given, such that it is in response to that, or in keeping with that, or in line with that, or in the furtherance of that self would present to its maker, then it is one. If they are in an at variance, or in opposition one to another, it is as given, he that gathereth not with me, scatters abroad. Why are all my undertakings mostly confronted with such difficulty? Through difficulty, has the entity gained much of the experiences in the past, as well as in the present. Those that overcome difficulties may wear the crown. Those that succumb to difficulties are counting themselves unworthy. Keep the faith as is being builded through the love influence, putting behind thee those things that so easily beset, looking forward to the mark of the high calling as is set in him through the ideals as have been set. Then the better things in the mental, the spiritual, the physical life, even in the present, will be that reward. In the one then, before this we find, during that period or experience when the Master walked in the land, in the flesh, and about that home the entity came to know of the service rendered, for the entity being a friend, or a neighbor, of the little house in Bethany, the entity knew much of that love shown in that experience to those peoples, wherever the Master walked. In the name Thesi. In this experience the entity gained through that understanding. Hence there has come in the present that knowledge of the closer relationships to individuals, as well as the understanding of the love of the Creator, for that created, through the gift of the promise to men. Keep in that promise. For as the various experiences of man in his relationships to the Creator are as those of science to individuals who seek to know his face, no matter how far one may wander, when the sincere, earnest cry is to know that face, he is faithful who has promised, and is able to keep that as is committed unto his keeping against any circumstance, any trial, that may come in the experience of his children. For he has promised that we shall not be chastened beyond that we are able to bear, and he that endureth unto the end shall wear the crown of eternal life. And, even though he were the Son, yet learned he obedience through the things which he suffered. So, as the cry went from him, why, hast thou forsaken me? May oft be wrung from our own beings. Yet, even as he stayed and raised him to perfection, giving unto him all power, so may we in that love, even as experienced by the entity, know that contentment, that joy of serving, even with him. For all things, whether of mind or of matter, arise from the spiritual concept, and it depends upon the sincerity, and with what spirit an entity uses these as to the abilities of the entity to control others. Should it be changed as the ideal way, should the change be for thine own good or for the good of all concerned? For if self is put first and foremost it is self-worship. For there is nothing that may separate thee or any soul from the mercies and the grace of God save self, and that by insincerity. In the abilities, keep in the way in which ye judge not, if ye would not be judged. Remember, with what measure ye mete to others must eventually be meted to thee. If ye would have friends, if ye would have love, if ye would have patience, manifest same. Each of these are the attributes of the Spirit of truth, and as ye apply same in thy experience, the greater becomes thy measure of faith. For if ye have not faith in others, how can ye have faith in God? If ye have not faith in God, how can ye find it in thyself? But these working with thee, and if ye will call together, together thy problems are one. Thy desires must be one, thy purposes must be wholly before him. Ye cannot with thy mouth praise or bless God, and with thy activities curse thy neighbor. For in thy neighbor is the image of that God ye would bless or call upon. Also in the mental, keep the faith. Hold fast to that, and know it is a growing thing. Then in the changes that come in environments, in associations, let that faith in the divine in self ever respond to that known innately within self. That wipes us out also, and that is the end of the business that I watch, as Gary understands. That, then, is that situation as is given here that, as the conditions arise, there will be given to self that necessary to do, to meet the needs as they arise. There needs be little fear in self that, will the body keep self mentally in that attunement, as is defined by self, as to the purpose of self in this undertaking, there will not be given that necessary to act, and the body and its influences, and its labors will not be wiped out, nor the purpose defeated. Keep self, then, in that attunement, and in that accord as to the purpose as was set in self when it was given thee to found the conditions, as they exist, and that the body would be guided at the board at the time. For the body will receive that instruction, and be not afraid. For I am with you, saith he that would guide. I will not forsake you, saith he that would be at the board. I will not confound you in unstableness, says he that told and guided in Macy. I will not leave you, saith the Lord. The appearances in the earth have much more to do with thy personality and individuality than the sojourns in the realms between same. Thus ye are tended towards judgments by material standards, and these are false standards. Take warning. For what mattereth it to a man that he gain the whole world, yet lose his own soul? No, there is nothing that may separate thee from the love of God, but thine own self. No urge, no activity may break thy will, if ye will ask, as indicated, Lord, be thou the guide. The entity contributed of its material means, as well as its physical activities through the experience. The entity was then in the name Reruhal. The entity gained through the experience, and may there be that counsel. Keep that faith which prompted thee. Let nothing take it from thee. For as ye have known, there is nothing in heaven or in hell that may separate thee from the love of God, but thine own self, thine own denial of self in relationships to Him, who blessed thee in person. Give a clear definition of the word faith, with reference to faith, as required by one who is sick and desirous of being helped through psychic readings. In what faith means to the individual. As we have faith in the substance, of that which is hoped for, with the evidences from things seen or of things unseen. As in this, the desire of the heart or issues of life to be the assistance not from self, but even as the Maker gives, as is given that love is law. Law is love. Love is giving. Giving is as God, the Maker. How faith is developed. How faith is developed. Faith is developed by the use of it. It cannot be taught or forced, neither can true faith be destroyed. Through the exercising of faith, we are able to give enlightenment to others. Let the mind be in us that was in Jesus the Christ. Then there will come faith that is sufficient unto every need, even that faith which removes mountains, changes the destiny of nations, yea, and even brings worlds into existence. Do we believe this? Then, how may this be accomplished? By opening our hearts in meditation to the unseen forces that surround the throne of grace, beauty, and might, and at the same time by throwing about us the protection found in the thought of the Christ, we can accomplish this. Then let us add to our faith works, which show forth attributes that are expressions of His Spirit in the world. Thus shall our faith develop, and become to us evidence of things not seen. We must show by our actions in our daily lives that we believe, that we have faith, and that we know as we use what we have, more will be given. In times of trial, let us think of the faith that has sustained others in troubles far greater than ours. When our conscious minds would magnify our doubts, let us awaken our faith by rising above the cries of the flesh. Are we not children of the Most High? Let us hold steadfastly to this gift that is God-given, that will lead us upward along the way of life. In studying and applying cooperation, in using the knowledge we have gained in knowing ourselves, in holding to our ideal, and in never letting our faith falter, we are building step by step that which may become living truth in the lives of individuals with whom we come in contact. As we apply what we know, there is given a greater understanding of how our faith may increase and become a living thing in our experience. We are in our daily lives reflections of what we worship. Let our light so shine that others seeing the light in us may glorify God. The Edgar Cayce readings. 3. How faith is developed. If ye would invite confidence, ye must give it. If ye would invite love, ye must show it. As to the abilities of the entity in the present, then, and that to which it may attain, and how, this, as the entity has experienced, is limited only to the desires of the entity and its faith in the one force or God. For by faith are ye saved, and that not of yourself. For it is the gift of thy Maker. This one principle the entity must gain, or become more aware of, if the greater understanding, the greater knowledge would be attained, or the greater good accomplished. it is in the giving of that which is attained that the abilities come for greater comprehension and understanding. This applies not only in the material. For, in this present day, though hardships make it necessary for the consideration of economic influences, and many activities have caused the entity to oft curtail its efforts in some directions, fame and fortune will be the lot of the entity in this experience, unless there's a failing entirely in the use of that which is in hand. First, as seen or presented well in Exodus 19:5, there must be the desire for spiritual light, for spiritual insight, for spiritual purpose. That the body, the mind may be in accord or attuned to the infinite, as manifested in the soul of the entity. Then, as expressed by the lawgiver, it is in self and not without self that the consciousness must come. As given, my spirit, God's spirit as manifested in the Christ, bears witness with thy purpose. Thus the ideal set in Christ, as manifested in the individual entity called Jesus, is the way, is the only way that true light, the truth in light, may be experienced in mind, in body. For as in the Godhead, we find the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. So the mind of the entity is the way, as Jesus. The body is the whole, the one. The Spirit, that ye entertain, is that which may coordinate with the mind of the Christ and not the mind of self for material desires. For he, the Father God, will not withhold any good thing, physical, emotional, mental, that is held in the consciousness of the entity who seeks his face. Let that mind be in thee which was in him, who gave, I and the Father, God, are one. So become ye in thine own mind, as ye contribute, as ye attune thy inner self to those greater ideals, for it is not all of life just to live, nor yet all of death to die. For, they that put their whole trust in him have passed from death unto life. And to such there is no death, only the entrance through God's other door. One that has ever the high ennobling forces in the life, and reasons towards same without respect to person or to position. Yet, as will be seen, the entity's experiences have carried the entity through many various phases of fame and power, when viewed from the purely material viewpoint. Yet such positions often brought those unsatisfactory results in such a way and manner that the reasoning force through the sojourn in Mercurian forces has made that advance in the development of the entity in the manner that all must at least be reasonable to the entity for it to attain a tenet through any condition presented. Well that this be used, but remember, same can be taken for self's own detriment. For without faith none may gain the highest development in the material, or the spiritual plane. For when one may not have faith in that not seen, how may one expect that reflected from self to inspire others to faith in that the body mind, the mental mind, or the self represents? For it is the law to be the law, and the law is love. Even as he showed in all of his manifestations, in the material experiences in the earth. That ye doubted, honestly, that is in the eyes, in the heart, in the soul even of the Creator counted, even as of old, desire, honest desire, not because faults did not arise in the material world, but they were mitted to Abraham, even as he said, as faith. Faith is manifested by that evidence of things not seen, but the hope in the promises of that which is creative in thine inner self, thine own soul, as it seeks expression, hopes for in the life, yea in the blood of the Lamb, which is the life that lights the whole world. At once the entity may ask, as so much gain was made, why the path so often seeming uneven? Oh, so rocky! Be thou faithful unto the end. He was in the world and the world knew him not. He came to his own and his own received him not. He calls to thee, as he has oft in thine experiences in the earth, and as he has reckoned and beckoned to thee oft in thine present experience. And the more oft thou hast said, yet a little while, and when the material things of life are somewhat easier, and when I have more time, I will consider and study those things. Thou fool! Knowest thou not that he is life? He is that through which all may approach to that experience in which the physical, the mental, the spiritual life may indeed be worthwhile. Study, then, now. Read that as he gave in that recorded in John 14, 15, 16 and 17. As is said in the Standard Version, "Seek in my name, believing, and it is done in thee." First find in self that which is its ideal, knowing that which is innately felt must be founded in things spiritual. And so attuning self, and so making for the motivating forces in its associations with its fellow man, give out, not so much in reserve. Fear not. For he can and does guide thee. Thy day is before thee. The influences that were said of Caesar, the stars fight for thee. Keep thou the faith, but the faith in thy God to use thee as a blessing, as a channel of understanding to others through thee. 4. The greater the entity holds to an ideal, the higher will be the entity's own standard that it sets not only for itself, but for those whom the entity does, and will influence in its sojourn. 4. It is not that acquired for self that makes for growth, but that the self makes in the experience of others. When an entity or soul so lives, so manifests its ideals that others are not only attracted to but desire in themselves to be better for having known and been with such a body, then growth may be assured in the experience of any soul. Where faith abounds. Where faith abounds. Only into the heart that is free from selfish love can there come a faith that will sustain in all conditions of life. Our faith must be a sustaining faith, a living faith, one that we can try out daily and know to be sure and steadfast. Where there is real faith, there is no fear, for with faith in the abiding love of the Father, what cause is there for us to have an anxious moment? Every step of the way is shown to us who are faithful. For his word is a lamp to our feet. When the way is dark and barriers seem impassable, then the light of the Sun of Righteousness shines forth to us, who abide in the promises he made. When faith abides within, we have true freedom and the assurance that we have no master save Jesus the Christ, and that we are protected by the strong arm of the Father. The feeling of security, protection, and peace that passes understanding is found nowhere else. Faith is the promise sent on before to show that whatever we ask we have. The Edgar Cayce readings. 4. Where faith abounds. For when fear or doubt arises, it makes for that as becomes the natural effect of turmoil, unrest. Yet positive forces in the seeking, positive forces in the acting become as harmonious to the entity. What can I do to find mental peace? Only by the looking within, trusting in the creative forces. Meditate often, sincerely. Do not speak one way to thy Lord and another to thy brother. Is there any other advice or guidance at this time, either of mental or physical nature? We would keep for the body much of that faith, that attitude in which it, the entity as an entity, is training its own self. Some of the experiences bring rather contentions with the inmost self, and when the body-mind draws comparisons, these make for flares from within. Yet little by little is there the attuning of self that it, the entity, may become as the shining light to many, that will bring the more perfect understanding and contentment and harmony and joy within. Each soul should be joyous in the expressing of the Lord's service in the earth. Those that look for the glory in him, those that seek to know his counsel, may have same, through that faith that passeth all understanding, that faith has brought worlds into being, that faith that creates within the body physical those elements that may rebuild, may replenish the whole of the physical forces, those that through the faith in life itself may make for a new blood stream, the issue of the physical life. This, then, is that which should be the ideal of this body, in him will I put my trust, as to open the way that I may have a better insight, as to what he would have me do, day by day. In the relationships with individuals about them, with the individuals who have known them best, with the individuals whom I may meet only in the passing, will there be seen by those even who run, that the Christ Spirit hath awakened the body consciousness, the mental forces of the body itself. Self-analysis necessary. Self-analysis necessary. The solution of mental problems is more important to us than physical, although this does not seem true to the average individual lost in the twisted paths of materialism. Free the mind and the battle is almost won. Mental anguish is far greater than physical. For the mind can conquer physical pain, but it is necessary for the spiritual forces to aid the suffering mind. The savages worship a god who will send rain and sunshine and protect them from lightning. The philosopher seeks a god who will give peace in mind and soul. Do we know in whom we believe? If so, then the ideal or standard toward which we move becomes the basis for the activity of faith in constant action from the mental, imaginative, and spiritual forces. Thus we may express or bring into manifestation that which is held as our ideal, not for self-exaltation, but rather to show the blessings we have received and to see them manifested in the lives of others. Let us look within ourselves and know that we are workers together with God. We should analyze ourselves to find out just where the flesh is weak, where we are most likely to fail, and then seek a constant reinforcement of spirit that will make us hold on with unwavering faith to our ideal. The Edgar Cayce readings. 5. Self-analysis necessary. This makes also for those determinations, as it were in the experience of the entity, even to that point where oft others consider the entity rather inclined to be set, or determined in its manner, or activity. But if these are held to, that which the entity desires, wishes, builds within itself, it may in this experience to the greater extent attain to. For though the entity little understands as yet, if there is the intense study of how mind is indeed the builder, it will see that what is held in the act of mental vision becomes a reality in the material experience. For mind is the builder, and that which we think upon may become crimes or miracles. For thoughts are things, and as their currents run through the environs of an entity's experience, these become barriers or stepping stones, dependent upon the manner in which these are laid, as it were. For as the mental dwells upon these thoughts, so does it give strength, power to things that do not appear. And thus does indeed there become that as is so oft given, that faith is the evidence of things not seen. First, analyze self and self's purposes. Know thy ideals, and know the difference between ideals and ideas. Few individuals have ideals that are based upon spiritual things, of which the mental and material ideals are merely the shadow. Ideas are thoughts, but thoughts are not always ideals. Know the author of thy ideal, and know that it is able to keep thee in whatever may be thy experience. And always be ready to give an answer for the faith that lies within thee. Is there any advice you can give to help me? If you will apply that as here given, it will help. First find self and self's relation, and what is desired to be done. Enter close oft into communion, into meditation with the consciousness within thyself of thy relationship to thy Creator. And then, as this is aroused, and you make application of the material things for the physical relief to give expression of same becomes naturally a part of the self. He that expects and puts his trust and faith in the Lord shall not be disappointed. He that would be double-minded may expect to be disturbed in the mental visions that are brought in the experience of such an one from time to time. The law is perfect. The flesh is weak. The spirit is willing. In making each compatible, then, an exercising of the prerogative that makes for the differentiation between an automaton and a living example is made manifest. Thus the sojourns of the entity in the earth become the greater ruling influences. But, as indicated, the greater study of man is man. The entity will find that it is made up of, or in fact is, a body, a physical being, visible. A mind, a body, only the effects of same may be seen in that which causes the entity to speak, or to act in this, or that manner towards its fellow man. Then it is the soul body or the entity, that is eternal. These are one. Just as the material concept of the creative force is Father, Son and Holy Spirit, and the answer to those influences, as of the bodies represented in the individual entity. These should be treated as such. For each has its attributes and that in which it is affected by or affects, or acts upon in response to the same influences in the individuals whom the entity may call friends or foes. But if you would have friends, be friendly. If you would be forgiven, you must forgive. If you would be thought well of, think well of others, not for thine own individual self, but for that which is thy ideal, that the principles and purposes, hopes and desires of self may be glorified in the earth. First then study to know self, body, mind, soul. Its relationships as one to another, and its activity and the activity of each in a material world. And that the relationships of self, as an individual, to the fellow man, are a reflection of the relationships self bears with creative forces or God. Then, first find self, and the promptings of the inner self. What are the motivative influences in the experience? And enjoin self in those things that may deal with the constructive force in the creating of new experiences for man, in the activative forces of those things that become creative in the material plane. These will offer an outlet for the abilities of the entity that will bring material mental success to the experience of the entity. Or join with those who may be in that field of activity of the scientific research into other fields, where there are the development, for the searching for lost or hidden civilizations, or activities. This will bring the experience to the entity, through the abilities, for the creating of aids and helps to man's experience, in its active forces from without, which will bring understanding in many of the fields of activity of the entity. Then, as ye show forth the fruits of the Spirit. What are these? Faith, hope, patience, long-suffering, kindness, gentleness, brotherly love, these be those over which so many stumble, yet they are the very voices, yea the very morning sun's light in which the entity has caught that vision of the new age, the new understanding, the new seeking for the relationships of a creative force to the sons of men. Evidences of faith. Evidences of faith. When the day is dark and the way is obscure, and we can still hold on, there is evidence that there is faith. When the sea of life is rough and we have the courage to step out boldly on the troubled waters, it is because there is still the divine gift at the very center of our being that is saying, "Peace, be still, for I am with thee and will not leave thee." We have heard it. We can hear it always, if we will only take the time to listen. When doubts arise and the clouds of despair are thick, do we not call out in the night, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Does not an answer come? Are we not stronger by having an experience that gives us a better understanding of our neighbor, who suffers in the same manner? Some years ago, I was with a party that was visiting a noted cavern. Everyone seemed very happy. After being in the cavern for a short time, I became very much frightened. The thought came to me, how terrible, how dreadful it would be, if we could not find our way out. The very air seemed to press in upon me. Ages seemed to pass. Then came the voice that has sustained me so often, "Lo, I am with you always. Be not afraid." With these words there came the strengthening of my faith. When loved ones are lingering in pain and no earthly help is nigh, are there not evidences of the faith of our fathers revived, when we pray and receive help? It brings the greatest comfort to us, not only in the trying times, but at all times, to know inwardly that his promises are sure. The Edgar Cayce readings. 6. Evidences of faith. As to the abilities of the entity in the present, these are limitless, if that which is the power of creative forces is taken as the director, the partner in same. In the fields of vibration, as related to economic conditions, as well as in the generating forces in growth of mineral, vegetable and animal kingdoms, the entity may, with application, find the outlets for self's abilities. Though keep thy head high, thy feet grounded in the faith in him. One may not be merely the good business man in his activities, and not be a good fellow man, ministering to the needs of those in every walk of life. For as the entity experienced through that sojourn, thou art indeed thy brother's keeper, and as was given in the days of yore, if ye are not faithful to that, thy brother's blood will cry aloud to heaven from the ground upon which it is spilled. Reward of faith. Reward of faith. Our rewards are in proportion to the faith we exercise. According to your faith be it with you. Whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing, ye shall receive. There is no limit to the reward. It is ours to measure, and ours to claim. Prove me, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. Let us open ourselves as channels, and have complete faith in God. For the battle is the Lord's. It remains to be seen what we can do when we give ourselves unreservedly into the hands of the Father. And I will pray the Father, and he shall give you another Comforter, even the Spirit of truth, who will guide you into all truth. And what shall I more say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, and of Barak, and of Samson, and of Jephthah, of David also, and Samuel, and of the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promise. And these all, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise, God having provided some better thing for us, that they without us should not be made perfect. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight, and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus the author and finisher of our faith. The Edgar Cayce Readings. 7. Reward of Faith. Inasmuch as it has taken longer to cure her daughter than was at first anticipated, advise the body how she and her husband can take care of this matter financially. Prepare self in the manner outlined, placing self in the hands of those forces, call them circumstances, call them what one will or may, it is the power of God, his is the all-force. Believest thou that thou livest in the midst of the Father? Then act that way. Never has there been seen one that wholly trusted in God at want, nor their seed begging bread. Then together, first approach that throne of not merely promise as one to another, but rather as determining in the heart, in the very soul of self, come what will or may, we will face the issues of life, in his name. Trusting in him for the very desire to do good, to be shown the way day by day. For he hath not and does not fail those who put their abounding trust in him. As to the mental attitude, and the correct living, it is not that some special law or dispensation is to be adhered to or sought, but to live a consistent and persistent life in the relationships with thy fellow man, as ye would have thy fellow man do to thee, being oft in prayer as to directions, and living in the same manner towards God and man as ye pray. And, according to the faith in him who is able to restore thy whole body, be it unto you. How may I raise my vibrations so as to contact the Christ? Making the will, the desire of the heart, one with his, believing in faith, in patience, all becomes possible in him, through him to the Father. For he gave it as it is. Believest thou? Then, according to thy faith be it done in thee. Put self rather, then, in the hands, in the mind, of the divine from within, and not attempting, not trying to be good, to be kind, to be thoughtful, but just be, and consecrate self to the service of others. This peace, this quietness that will come within self from such, will find a ready answer in the mind, in the heart, in the life, in the expression of those, every one, whom the body contacts. This is living consecration, and not attempting to be moral for moral's sake, not attempting to be good that good may come, but be good that there may be that peace, that understanding, that only comes from putting self in the hands of the divine. Study, then, portions, any portion, of the words of him that gave that ye ask in my name, believing, that shall ye have within yourself. Do not, then, in asking, make conditions, but surrender self unconditionally into the hands of the divine from within, and that from within shall answer, even as was said, my spirit beareth witness with your spirit that ye are called the sons, the daughters, of the living God. For in him only is that peace, and the blessings of those whom the body contacts will bring the greater joy, the greater happiness. How can I best help my 6 children to become part and parcel of the kingdom of God on earth? By just living and being that ye would ask each of them to be. Better by precept or example. Not by what you say, but what you are. These are the things that will grow most in the experience of those to whom ye have given, and do give spiritual and mental help. For as the entity has found, there has been only the need to express the desire, and it has come to pass in thy experience. This is the very nature, the very practice of that he has given, that what ye ask in his name, believing, is done already. Because it doesn't happen today, doesn't indicate that it won't happen tomorrow. Because tomorrow never comes, unless today is filled with grace and love. For, know, as ye have found and have seen manifested so oft, to such as minister to those in every walk of life there comes oft those blessings, as he hath indicated, see, may not the very windows of heaven be opened and a blessing poured out on such? After long pause, have you finished with this reading? Much more may be said regarding the work and the efforts of each of these. They may be presented from many different ways and manners. For they each physically have their burdens, their cares, their efforts to meet that which is then required for the necessary functioning of the forces. Then keep in that way, knowing, as has been given, in him is truth and light, and what ye ask in my name, believing, ye shall receive, ye shall receive. If ye love me, keep my commandments, and I will send the Comforter, and he will abide with thee. For indeed if these last be the aims, the purposes in self, they must eventually turn upon thee. But if the seeds and the purposes are of truth, and knowledge pertaining to the spiritual associations in the activities, these being the cause, the purpose, yea the very author of thy faith, thy confidence, thy desire, then we may expect and we may know these will grow and bring the fruits of the Spirit, enabling each soul to become more patient, more long-suffering, more charitable, with stronger fellowships and the abilities to know, though the world may be against thee, though there may be trials and tribulations, there may be even want in body and want in the material things for the body, yet that food which is found in him as the author and finisher of thy faith becomes the bread of life, the water of life, the true vine, that is, the Son. Keep, then, to that same hope and faith, that ye expect others to have in thee, in thy fellow man. Looking to him who is the author and the finisher of faith. For, know that Jesus, as the Christ, is the power of God unto salvation to all that believe and trust in him.